What if the NFL season instead of the NFL Combine started today? What would the New Orleans Saints depth chart look like? Well, I created one just to see, but I think more importantly, it showed a clear snapshot of the Saints starting point for the 2026 offseason. So let's go ahead and take a look at it and break it down. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. So before we start talking about the depth chart itself, kind of need to talk about how we got to it, right? Um, Saints have about 60 some odd roster players right now. About 70% of that actually played snaps in 2025. The remainder, uh, most of it's tied into two categories. Uh, Injured reserve, they were hurt all year, couldn't play, or practice squad guys that were brought in specifically for depth and or development. Going, look, they're really not going to get it on the field unless we have an emergency situation. For the most part, this is where they're going to stay for the season and reevaluate in the offseason. Handful, obvious three, punter, kicker, long snapper, but a handful may have gotten on the field, but only in special teams capacity. They didn't play any offensive snaps, they didn't play any defensive snaps. That's really what we're looking at right now, only because it's hard to project when the sample size in 2025 is zero where some of these guys are going to fit in. I think we can go, yeah, they might have a shot to be here, be there, or be anywhere, but right now it's completely unknown because some guys may not be healthy enough, some guys may not have developed enough, etc. So when you're looking at the offensive side, and let's go ahead and start there. Total snaps 1,125 for the offense. But of those, only 6 players played 50% of the snaps, which would technically be 562.5, but let's round that up to 563. But it's Olave, Ruiz, Johnson, Fuaga, Shuck, and Banks. That's 6 out of 24. Everybody else, for various reasons, didn't, and most of them didn't even get close to playing half the season for you. But I don't think any of them are unknown quantities. Even, like Ronnie Bell and Turi, who only showed up to play that last game to fill in some holes in the receiving core. They had been around the league for a while, so even though if they weren't specifically on the Saints, the Saints themselves, and we as fans probably don't know much about them. The Saints themselves had useful information, and they obviously still have it. Overall, it's bringing this up because I don't think it's a good thing or a bad thing when you're talking about lack of snap counts for the Saints in 2025, especially when you're in the position that we're in, which is we're rebuilding. So right now, it's about finding talented guys first and foremost, because if you don't, then the second part of the statement doesn't matter. But finding the right guys that you want either to build around or that you're going to have to bring in while you're continually fixing that roster and turning that depth chart into something where right now, let's be honest, you looked at that offensive depth chart. If that's the offense we're kicking off 2026 season with, man, it's not where you're going to want to be, right? But we know that isn't the offense that we're going to be kicking off the 2026 season. All it is the starting point, and we know where we're working from. When the combine, which starts today, starting the evaluation process, what are we going to add and how are we going to add it? Where are we going to add it? Again, going back when you looking at that list, Olave, he's the guy receiver, but the rest of the receiving core falls into some categories of some of those guys will be here and they'll contribute. Make the best guesswork that Valet is going to be one of them. I think Austin Jr. right now has a real shot. The rest of them are going to fall into, I think, having to fight some of the guys we're not putting on this list because they just weren't on the field in 2025. You're looking at the offensive line. Interior is a mess. We know that. Left guard, right now, Simpkins is your likely starter. McCoy, only center you have on the roster. Ruiz, he's Ruiz. And we all know that there needs to be some improvement there, and the quicker the better. And I don't think Sherman's necessarily the guy, although as an emergency fill in last year, he wasn't bad. Same with the Sim Richards backing up Banks and Fuaga, where we're good. Get to the skill positions, tight end and running back, you're kind of in the same category. Running back's a big need because just don't know what you're going to be able to squeeze out of Alvin, and you don't know what the rest of those guys are going to do. And one of the guys you think would be awesome, Kendre Miller, is another one you just can't keep him on the field. So question marks all over the place, but it's not necessarily a question of we don't have enough talent or we don't have enough depth. But at the same time, you can look at the whole piece of the puzzle and say, we don't overall in the offense, we don't have enough talent, we don't have enough depth. But we're not kicking off the season. We're kicking off the process of how to fill that depth. And look on the defense, it's pretty much the same thing with those 19 guys. If you were going to roll into game one with this defense right now, I mean, you wouldn't feel horrible, but you'd recognize the same thing that the puzzle is not finished yet. There's still some pieces in there that we have to find. And even if, say, some of the older guys on this roster, on the interior especially, Gottschall and Shepard are the two that pop right out at me. We're probably going to get something out of them this year if we need them. If we, and I hate to say it this bluntly, but it's true. If we don't replace them where we don't need them in this offseason, we still got to put some beef behind them because the likelihood of us getting more than 50% of meaningful snaps, and they both make the list off this defense, isn't as high as it was last year. That list is actually Sanker, Reed, Werner, Granderson, Brzee, Shepard, Gottschall, McKinstry, and Riley. Did you get down to the defensive backs? I think you're pretty solid at safety, but wouldn't hurt if you could find another just huge playmaker. Corners thin, because I don't even know if Isaac Yiadom, one of the three cornerbacks on the roster, I don't know what his future on this team is unless we just have no other options and he gets to stay. But you look at our top two guys we feel good about. And then you say that a lot about our defense. Guys we feel good about, some of them more proven than others, some age and some spots that we've got to address. Overall, not bad, but it's not going to be good enough. And we know that the improvements need to come. The whole point is when I was trying to figure all this stuff out, film room, especially trying to get a look at the rookies, I was looking at the individual pieces. So I'm using my puzzle analogy again. But I wasn't figuring what the whole puzzle was going to look like once all the pieces fit, once you get them all organized and you start putting it together. So that was like, I need to move this away from a mental exercise to something I can physically look at in really, and I don't want to say guess because this is all a guess, but being more accurate, I think, once I'm looking at every position. How many players are we talking about? What's the pool we're pulling from? How much did they play? How much did they bring when they were on the field, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Which is exactly what the Saints front office and coaching staff should be doing. God help us if they aren't. But putting myself more in that mentality and looking at it, and this is where one thing we got to mention before we kind of wrap this up. But looking at this, whether you free agency draft, how you going to do this, the one thing you got to mention, I was totally unaware of this 6 days ago, this whole 3-year average salary floor with the NFLPA collective bargain into the whole, in a nutshell, the Saints, in largely due to last year, because we had to slash so much salary just to get ourselves out of total cap hell. Below the 3-year average, I think 1 of 7 total teams that happened to. And so because of this collective bargaining, there's a number of cash they have to spend this year. So when I first saw it, it was like 50 million. I was like, holy crap, we're going to put us right back where we were, but not necessarily. Nick Underhill and Mike Triplett had an explanation that, just in a nutshell, when the season opens March 11th, to make up that deficit of that 3-year average, we have the whole 2026 league year, which again opens March 11th, to make up that. And that's any cash we spend on player salaries kicks to that. The reason why I bring it up is kind of changed my mentality a little bit of how we're going to be looking at free agency, because the question is, or prior to this coming out, and it's an obscure rule, and it kind of sounded like they didn't even really know about it till they heard about it and had to go look it up. Um, it just now solidifies we're no longer as much having the question, well, do you want to throw a bag of cash at player X, regardless of who he is and what he plays, to, well, somebody's going to get it. Whether we're paying it in free agency, whether we're extending, say Chris Olave would be the big name coming up, going, yeah, you know, if he gets his extension, that raise is going to kick towards that number. Bringing back one of the veterans that we were shaky about, going, we got to spend this money on somebody we don't necessarily like as much anybody else in free agency having to spend. Demario Davis comes to mind, where if we have to spend 8 million on one of these three players and he's one of them, do we bring him back a year, knowing we try again next year, or we get another linebacker in the draft, a young one that we want to develop, like we did with Stutzman last year? Point being is, if you know you got to spend it, then it's no longer a hang up, and this is why I'm saying this. Specifically, somebody in mind, if left guard is going to be one of the big, and it looks like it is, the big free agent spins out there, puts us in a position where we got to drop a bag on somebody, and it's David Edwards. Why the hell not? Because you got to, the league's mandating you got to spend it somewhere on somebody. So in a weird way, that rule coming out, when I first heard about it, I was like, oh my god! But once it was kind of explained, I went, well, if there's a question mark, i.e., somebody offers um, somebody we desperately want to bring in free agency X, and we go, well, we can go X plus 8 because that 8 is, that whole number is counting towards that 50 the league's making us spend. So, just to bring that up. And I think it is important because we're going to have to do a lot of work in free agency, fill those holes, and to bring in depth. But it's not gonna fix everything. Still have to have that draft, right? And I think we're in a unique situation in the fact we're no longer cash strapped. We're not completely out of the woods yet, but we will be by 2027, barring doing something incredibly stupid, which that option's always available to the Saints. But I don't think they will. So you should be able to find one of our position at needs and have the ability, and you're being kind of compelled by the league to do it. Find the right one, give him the bag, get him in the building. Let's get him ready. And as you progress into the draft, which you don't fill it in free agency, I'm feeling like this draft shakes out a lot like the last two, where we came out very, very well out of both of them, especially last year, where we just yesterday won an award in Indy for having the best draft, you know, in 2025. But in 2 years running with our first two picks, we grabbed, which seems first round talent in Fuaga, then Banks. Seems with our second pick, first round talent in McKinstry and Shuck. We're picking basically in the same spots, 8 and 42 as we were there. But the overall talent of this draft, I feel like those two were, there's about 15, maybe 20, somewhere in that range, give or take. Of, yeah, there may be one bust in there that nobody's seeing or everybody's missing, would be a better way to put it. But still, your odds are good. You're going to walk out very good football player at 8. But the second part of this is what happened in the last 2 years. That next group, that end of the first round, all the way through the second, and edging into the third round in some cases. There's a lot of talented football players who are really, really good. But there's going to be a couple in there somewhere, like a McKinstry, like a Shuck, fell out of the first round, and then you're looking at it and going, they have as much first round talent as a lot of the guys taken in the first round, and more than about a third of the guys actually taken in the first round. You can do that the third year in a row in the draft. And this year we really get to be players in free agency, unlike all the hell we've been through the last few years where we really couldn't, those holes, this whole exercise of the if the season started today, we'd be like, with that depth chart, yeah, we're eventually going to be in a lot of trouble. Well, why it's not a good or a bad thing is in the sense, well, we know where we got to get our work in. We know we're capable of doing it through the draft the last 2 years, and we know we finally got our heads out of our you know what and got the salary cap working on the right way of things where when we need to jump into free agency and get a player or players, we have the ability to do so. So just to wrap it up, not a long video today because I think, this kind of sets the tone. Combine coverage will be starting in a couple of hours. It just kind of sets the tone of what the team better be doing, and I think kind of getting the feeling they fixed their delusional problems of those years of double and triple and quadruple down in the early 2020s that were killing us, and now getting back to this situation. Here's the snapshot. Here's the puzzle. Whatever you want to call it. We know this. We think we know this. We have to develop this. This is what's available to us. It's not on our roster. We have to go find it free agency in the draft. Looking at that kind of pseudo depth chart I was put together, it pops real clear where those spots are. I think a blind man could see it. So our front office should be able to handle it. But we're in a position now, and I haven't felt this way in probably since 2018 and 2019, in a position through both means to get this team ready in 2026, where dare we say, hey, can we win 9, 10, 11 games, win the damn division and get back into the playoffs? Put yourself in a position to do that. And it starts today, right now, knowing this is where we're at. This is where we need to go. And starting today, the plan of how we're going to get there starts formulating and comes together. So my 2 cents on the subject of how the depth chart looks currently, and reiterating, it's neither good or bad now. But starting today through March free agency, especially, and ending in late April in the draft, because that's going to be a last real chance to do anything about it. A lot of hard and tough work that the Saints need to do in there. But I think we're in a position, again, as long as we don't do anything stupid, we're in the position to really strengthen this team and finally get out of that rut we've been and get back to being who we were. And to me, that's kind of exciting. So, interested in the combine, definitely is interested in free agency and seeing how it all shakes out. Let me know down in the comments, what you think. And, like I said, I realize there's some names I don't have on there that you can go back and look, and they're going to be on this roster and they will be on there. But, you know, we probably all know who they are. But if you want to talk about them, that's fine. I get it. I get it. I really do. Um, don't quite know where we're going from this yet, still, because combine's going to happen, and there may not be even a video next week. I think it kind of depends on what happens in the combine or anything that may happen next week. But I think this is going to be the relatively quiet before the storm when free agency kicks in. And the whole real point of this is, as I mentioned, we need to have that figured out because we need to be big players. We're being forced to be in a bigger player in free agency than we thought more than a week ago. But we need to be a player and we need to get it right. So that'll probably be the next focus when it's time to talk about that. But until I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.